Yeah, thanks, guys. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we're going to just start, I guess, at sort of the beginning of the article in U.S. Lacrosse. You kind of talked about some of the bigger moments in your life. And towards the beginning, you talked about one that occurred in a parking lot. Can you just touch on that a little bit and why that was so important in terms of your life as a whole?
Yes, it was my senior year of high school. We were about midway through the season, and I had just right after practice, my friend Ben just smoked me, absolutely burned me on a dodge, and I took that. That was the one little piece that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And I had this plan and this feelings of worthlessness for so many years, and it kind of all came to a head that day, and then in that moment. And so I'm sitting on the back hatch of my Jeep in the parking lot after practice, just staring out into the distance. And Ben came by. I'm thankful that he did, and he was just like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I didn't say a word. I was not perceiving much around me other than what I had planned. And he asked me, how can I help? And I was at a point that I just broke down and told him what I planned to do, how I planned to kill myself by suicide. And he stuck with me that whole day, and the rest of that day distracted me, got me doing some different things, and really got me out of my first acute suicidal experience.
What can we learn from not only yourself in that moment, but also from your teammate Ben? What do you think we can take away from your actions there?
Well, I think twofold. One is if somebody tells you that they're planning or they're thinking of ending their life by suicide, that you take it seriously and you do what you feel you can. Certainly, Ben by no means was a professional. He was just a teammate. He was my age in high school, right, a fellow senior. And we didn't even really know each other well beyond that. Our friendship has grown over the years, and I consider him one of my best friends today. But he, in a moment, kind of realized something wasn't quite right. I had a drastic change in behavior from what he was used to seeing with me, and he just, offered to be there when I didn't feel I was worth having that kind of human connection. And that still touches me today. So from a Ben side of things is, if you're concerned with somebody, ask. If you're wrong, it's a little bit of embarrassment, but not too much of a problem there. People get over that. But if on my side of things, it's people care about you. You get into a spot with depression and suicidal ideation where it's very much tunnel vision as relates to emotions and connections with people. You literally just don't feel other people around. And you can't feel that people care for you. And so it makes it very easy to think about just going away, right? So it's knowing that if somebody asks that people are there for you despite you maybe not feeling it.
Mm. Yeah, and you think about yourself as an athlete and Ben as an athlete, and and just in my experiences too. I mean, athletes don't really want to admit weakness. It was what they seem could be weakness of any kind, and you think about that with injuries. And I think in this case too, that seems like it's an important factor in this. That it's not a moment of weakness; it's a moment almost of strength to say, "Hey, man, this is what I'm going through." Or for him to kind of do the same thing. You agree with that? Kind of in that athlete mentality.
I would absolutely
Yeah.
agree with that, and it's a thing where yes, you can consider it a moment of weakness because yeah, you're weak at that moment. I was not in a right state of mind that moment and several others, and having somebody reach out or reaching out to someone just means that you can recognize that, or even if your conscious mind doesn't, then some deep part of you that wants to live does, and so you can listen to that. I think not even so much even with lacrosse, but my martial arts background, I spent years just tapping and getting worked on by adults in the gym until I eventually got good and I could I could flip that. But there's something to be said about publicly saying, okay, nope, enough. Let's reset. And so that has been, I think, a very good thing for me personally to be able to have an experience with saying, okay, failure's here, and tap and move on. And that's something that's I didn't so much know it then, but that and lacrosse were very much the first few things that, even though I was weak mentally in terms of how I was able to talk and couldn't express what it is I was thinking, that gave me a foundational basis for what I'm doing now and being able to talk about it.
Yeah, and it seems like from, reading your story and hearing you speak, resilience is a big word that comes to mind when I think about you and the kind of the things you've gone through, all those ups and downs through the years. Obviously, the incident we were just talking about wasn't the only time where you had these thoughts or got to that really dark place. How did you get out of those dark places over and over again?
If I can't really point to a clear answer for you there.
Yeah.
If I do think of one, I'll certainly spread the word on that. But I think a friend of mine and a close mentor of mine in officiating told me, he put it one way of that my life force is strong. If they're, conceptualize that idea of whether I had the belt around my neck and standing on the stool or the loaded gun in my mouth or against my temple, there was still something at a base level that kept me from doing it. And I still don't quite understand that even today. But because of that, I am able to speak to an extreme of an experience that scares people, whether they have these thoughts or not. Because no matter what, this stuff is in the population. It is in our families. It is in with our friends and colleagues and coworkers and teammates. And I get to shine a little bit of a light on the depths that somebody can go, and hopefully folks can hear that and know that things can be okay.
Yeah, and I know you talk about the different treatments and things like that, and how important medication has been for you, a psychiatrist, going to doctors, but what role has lacrosse really also played in making yourself better and healthier mentally?
Well, as a player, it gave me certainly a physical outlet. I don't think I truly fell in love with the game until I found officiating, and found that kind of subculture of people who were interested in just preserving the game, the rules, and playing fairly and playing in a safe manner, and to learn all the ins and outs of doing that well. So that has distracted the parts of my mind that want to go off into bad thinking, if you will, and I can focus on the professionalism of officiating, all the different aspects that I have to do before a game, not even just like the day of, but right now I'm running every day because I got to get ready for the shot clock coming up.
Right.
There's gonna be a lot of transitions, so.
Yep.
So it's the game has given me an opportunity to always work to my ideal self. And I don't mean that I don't think it's tough. I'd love to say that I can be my best self 24 hours a day, but I can't be right now. Maybe somewhere down the road, I can work up to that. But right now, an hour and a half to 2.5 hours at a time, I can do that in officiating and lacrosse every day, even in the off season, gives me the opportunity to strive for that.
Yeah, and I think realizing too that it's a daily battle too. It's a daily thing you need to be thinking about is so important. Gordon's going to stay with us in just a moment. He's going to speak a little bit more on what the impact he wants to make going forward and some advice he might have for someone going through the exact same thing. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Lacrosse Now, everybody. Definitely a different tone that we take today, but an important one at that. Gordon Corsetti joins us once again. He's going to talk now a little bit about what he wants, the impact he wants to make by sharing his story. Gordon, why have you decided now to share your story like this?
Well, my editor asked me that question about a year or so ago, and since June when we did the interview, and through each phase of the editorial process up until the last day to publish, he said, you have the opportunity to veto this whenever you want. And I appreciate that because I can pull the plug whenever. He's like, if you just don't feel comfortable one day and you think this is a bad idea, you can not go public with this. And that never crossed my mind to do it because for where I am in my life right now, it's something I'm no longer ashamed of. It's something that does not have a hold over me the way that it did. Even though, like I've talked about, it's still a daily battle. I still have depressed thoughts. I still have very background, I call them background thoughts of suicidal ideation that just kind of like just go by. And I have the ability now, through all the work that I've done on myself, my mind, my body, how I think, how I talk to myself, to ignore those automatic thoughts that I don't really have much control over, but my reaction to them, I certainly do.
Mm.
And I didn't know that when I was younger. So the long-term arc of what I've hoped to do with this article and the toolkit that I wrote about is I spent 5 years, 6 years without any type of actual diagnosis or treatment. And then I spent several years trying to figure out what was the best kinds or combination of medication, treatments, coping mechanisms. And so I went through a lot of stumbling around in the dark, both myself and then my family, once they got more involved with my mental health treatment and overall journey. And we all struggled. And there were some very dark and very scary moments for all of us as a family. And we're very tight knit, so it was rough to go through. But my goal with putting this out there and being able to have a conversation about suicide, about mental health, mental illness, however you want to talk about it, is just that we can talk about a scary, frightening subject without being scared of it. Number one, and number two, can I shorten the learning curve for the 15-year-old version of me, right? A kid now who's going through this, who's on a team, who's doesn't have the verbiage like I didn't have to articulate what it is that he or she is experiencing, is thinking, is concerned about, and to know that people won't judge them or consider them broken or consider them, malformed the brain, or they're always going to carry this stigma with them. It's a pervasive illness that messes with your personal views of self-worth. And my goal by talking about it is just to give people as many tools as possible to speak to it, and then certainly share what has been working for me recently in terms of finding out ways to cope with your illness.
Yeah, and it seems like almost every step of the way there's been people there around you that you might not even realize were there, like Ben that one day, or even farther along your path, it might have been a coach or a teammate or your mother that have all been there. Maybe you didn't even realize it at the time. What has the reaction been like since the article came out in U.S. Lacrosse Magazine last week?
It's been overwhelming. It's been overwhelmingly positive, but it's still also been overwhelming. I've heard from people, former teammates, folks that I haven't heard from in years, to many of my officiating peers and colleagues, mentors in different areas, who are like, "Whoa, we always thought of you as the kind of slightly nerdy official," which I will grant them, in that regard, but also of, I've had people who have reached out to me from Australia, from Austria, from Italy, and that's blown my mind. And they're like, your article deeply resonated with me. That's probably been some of the most common phrases that has been sent my way. But also, you're giving me some confidence to face another day, or be able to talk to my daughter, be able to talk to my son when I didn't think I could before, didn't at least know how to speak to my concerns for them. And that means a great deal to me. That it's been received in the manner that I was hoping for, and it's been deeply touching to read these responses and to know that I've had an impact that is positive now in people's lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear. And hear you appreciate and know that and realize that in this moment, which is awesome. What would be your advice, to someone maybe going through this, maybe having some of those thoughts? What would you tell someone like that, either at that age that you were first dealing with them, or now, or even in the future?
Well, I'll tell you, it might be easier to say what I wouldn't say to them, and then I'll say what I would. I don't like, and I certainly didn't like hearing from anybody, "Hey, it's fine, it's going to be okay, toughen up, get over it, you'll be fine." All those things don't particularly help in any way. And you wouldn't, the same way that you wouldn't tell somebody who has a broken leg, "Oh, just walk on it, it's fine, it's going to be okay," right? You just got to deal with whatever it is. No, there's a recovery process involved. And I think what I'd love to tell the younger me, if you will, or somebody that age in high school or middle school trying to figure out what's going on, is that if you're having thoughts that scare you, if you are having thoughts that concern you, is to find someone that you trust. It can be a family member, it can be a friend like Ben, it can be a school counselor, it can be the preacher at your church, whatever. But tell somebody And the main thrust of that is that if you just tell one person, right, just one, that this is scaring me and this is why, that you've doubled, if you're trying to take care of yourself, you've now doubled that. And then they're going to try to find out someone. If they're not a professional, they will work to try to find help for you. And that's been the biggest thing in my personal life, and now certainly in the bit of public life that I might have with this, is that people will help you. And to know that before having getting to an extreme of suicidal ideation or an extreme depression, knowing that before you go into that spiral can be a good thing to help you level out, in my mind.
Yeah, and even in that moment, you know, you said at the very end of the article, I succeed at living. So even in those darkest times, you're able to kind of find a positive out of that, and you've done that to this point. Gordon, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story with all of us. We know it's going to make an impact on an awful lot of people. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Back to you guys.